Hey guys, welcome back. Behavior Strategies for Class, which is where we empower educators with effective behavior management strategies that work so you can teach. So welcome. I am glad you're here. Today we're going to talk about executive functioning and how integral that is with emotional regulation. So intertwined in the brain's self-management system. I know it sounds a little much, but it's super important to understand your students aren't just slacking, like they're not just being lazy. Like they need to get these skills. So we're going to talk about how and why this affects your students' behavior and what strategies can improve this system that will help your students be successful. Welcome to Behavior Strategies for Class. I am Diane Bachman, your behavior paraprofessional with over 15 years of experience working in special education. And I'm so glad you're here because I'll be teaching you about social emotional learning, behavior strategies, trauma-informed care, and more. So if you are tired of being frustrated and not knowing what to do with your students who have challenging and disruptive behavior, you're in the right place. Now, if you're ready to become more equipped to help your students learn and grow, let's listen in to today's episode. So before we get started, I want to share a behavior boost, a behavior encouragement. So I am part of some other Facebook groups for teachers and educators. And so one of the questions that came up was, what do you do with a student who throws a chair or dumps over their desk in the middle of class? It's very interesting. A lot of people were just like, well, have them pick it up and get back to work. Some people were saying, well, you need to send him to the office and he needs to be suspended, these major consequences. Some were just like, you just need to talk to him and it'll be fine. We'll work it out. Really, honestly, the truth is that student should be removed from the classroom at that moment because they are obviously escalated enough that they're not making safe choices. And that is obviously affecting your classroom and affecting them. So if it is possible, I would have that student removed. If they can go sit in the office for a minute, if they can go sit with a counselor, if they can sit with admin somewhere, or, if you have a social worker or a school psych on campus, or sometimes even your security officer, if you have one. So just getting them into a safe space. Ideally, if you are able to go back and we call it kind of process with that student, go over. So what happened? Right? What made you so upset that you felt the need, to dump over the desk or, throw your chair, something. And obviously what could be done differently? Like, obviously this is not a safe choice. What could you do instead? We have to get them thinking of other ways that they can express their emotional overwhelm. Because obviously they cannot go through life picking up chairs and chucking them across the room, or throwing their desk on the floor, or shoving everything on their desk onto the floor. Whatever it is, this is not a good life skill. We need to change it. We need to help them replace that behavior. And what is it that is causing them this so much angst? Right? What is all this emotional overwhelm? And how can they channel that in a better way? I don't know what it is. Honestly, that's going to work best for your students. So your students, you have to find out what calms them down, what helps them. Definitely, I love having a calm corner, a calm space in your classroom. And just like this is going to be a constant teaching and reteaching. Like, what do you do? Sometimes we have students that go 0 to 100 in like seconds. So, as much as you are watching your students and knowing that, okay, like I can tell he's getting upset, like the next thing you know, a chair is coming across the room. As much as possible, like you want to give them the options. Okay, what else can you do? You can go to the quiet corner. You can say, I need to step out for a minute. I need to go to the bathroom. I need to speak to a counselor. I need to take a walk. Whatever it is that you have at your school and what's available and who's available to be able to get that student out and into a safe place is the best solution at that moment. But then being able to go back and process with them, getting them to think, what are some better ways that we can handle that? You can handle this and this overwhelm. Because not doing nothing is not okay. Giving them responsibility. So we have students who do this and, sometimes chairs are knocked over, tables are knocked over. We leave it all for that student. When they are regulated and able to understand, like, you did this, now you need to go clean it up, please. If you are able to do that and leave that chair across the room, leave it. If you're able to leave that desk laying on the floor, leave it. They have to learn also to take responsibility for their actions. So that is another important key that you need to follow up as well. So that's your quick behavior boost tip for today. So why and how does executive functioning really connect with emotional regulation? So a couple things to go over. So I'm sure most of you know executive functioning are the skills that your students have, like to plan, prioritize, organize their thoughts, their actions, inhibit their impulse, have that control. And that is coming from the prefrontal cortex of their brain, which also controls regulating their hormones. So now you can see how all of this works together. So the executive skill is like that impulse control. So on the emotional side, it helps them pause before reacting emotionally, preventing those outbursts or rash decisions. So that's exactly what I talked about in that behavior boost is they don't have that impulse control. And so they react emotionally and quickly in just an outburst because they haven't gotten that control yet. The executive skill is cognitive flexibility. And on the emotional side, this enables shifting emotional responses when situations change unexpectedly. So that for some of our students is like when the schedule of the day changes. When they know, okay, according to their schedule, they're supposed to be doing this, but now something has changed and now they can't do that anymore. They're going to do something else. Some students have a really hard time with that. And so they're emotional all over the place. They're crying, they're sad, they're mad, they're withdrawn. They don't know how to deal with it. So they haven't learned that executive skill of cognitive flexibility. So another executive skill is a working memory. And on the emotional side, that supports holding emotional context. So that's remembering those calming strategies. So sometimes you can give them like a poster or post-it notes or like a half sheet of paper that shows some calming strategies because they're having a hard time remembering what they need to do. They're just in overwhelm. Like, I know I need to do something, but I'm not really sure. They can't remember. And so you can create that for them so they can look on their desk, on the side of their desk, in that calm corner, and see, okay, this is what I know I can do. Another executive skill is that self-monitoring. And then on the emotional impact is where it allows reflection on emotional reactions and adjusting their behavior accordingly. So knowing like the appropriate emotional response to something. So, their friend just got an award. Are they going to sit and cry for an hour because they didn't get the award? Or are they going to turn and celebrate their friend who just got this cool award? So they're able to reflect on themselves like, okay, well, what's appropriate for right now? And know like, okay, it's not about me at this moment. How can I react, in an appropriate way? And then another executive skill is planning and organizing. And the emotional impact of that is that it helps reduce stress by creating the predictability, which supports that emotional stability. So when they know what's going to happen, like I said, you have the schedule down, you have it posted in your room, they can see, okay, math is almost done, it's going to be lunchtime next. And then after lunch, okay, I see we have specials. They know, and so that reduces stress when they can see, okay, this is the predicted schedule, what's going to happen today. So they're not in for a big, huge surprise. Now, usually if schedules change, for the most part, you as the teacher learns about that like usually in the morning. And so you can touch base with your students and say, okay, guys, this has to change in our schedule today. We're not really sure why, but whatever came up, and just let them know like there's a change. And so they see that. And then that also gives them that predictability because now they kind of know a little bit ahead of time that things have changed. I mean, that's kind of like we had a fire drill, and just giving students a little heads up, like this is what's going to happen. This is where we're going to go. It shouldn't take that long. And then as soon as it's over, we're coming back in and we're going to start math again. So they know kind of what to expect. And that really depends on you guys. I know I've been to some schools where they're like, nope, we're not telling the students at all. Like, we want this to really be a practice drill. Other times we prep some of our students so they are aware of what's going on. So executive functioning can be compromised. And that is where trauma has the effect as well. ADHD can affect it as well. Anxiety and stress. These all affect your students' emotional regulation. And so the brain is struggling to pause, reflect, redirect. And so because of trauma and these other things, their brain has that emotional flooding. Like I said, they're overwhelmed. So either they're exploding, having an outburst, or they have a shutdown and then they just like sit down and refuse and that's it. Or they have trouble calming down after a stressful situation. They have trouble identifying and naming those emotions. And then they also can have increased frustration, shame, or guilt because they're not getting it. They see other students getting it, but they're just not getting it. And so that can produce some shame or guilt. So again, poor executive functioning can lead to emotional dysregulation. It clouds their ability to plan or shift strategies. That anxiety can reinforce avoidance or shutdown. And for trauma-informed classrooms, which I hope you are working on creating, is recognizing that connection is key. So instead of seeing that emotional outburst as defiance, you can view them as executive skill breakdowns, right? Like they're not able to process, they don't have the skills yet to be able to regulate themselves. And so what you can respond with is scaffolding, right? Putting those structures in place to help them learn these skills. Because you want to strengthen their brain's ability to plan, focus, regulate emotions, and adapt to being flexible. So these skills can be learned. But one thing I can say is I feel like some teachers take it for granted that students know these skills. That students already know, like you need to organize your papers, you need to organize your binder, you need to organize your books, you need to organize your writing utensils. And, those are just kind of a given sometimes to assume that students know how to do that. And there really are a lot of kids who don't. And that's okay. This is a skill that can be taught, just like emotional regulation can be taught. So I want to give you some strategies that will help you build on these skills to help your students have more emotional regulation. So I'm going to talk about 7 strategies that will help boost your students' executive functioning. So number 1 is practice that real life problem solving. You can use collaborative problem solving skills to help students reflect, plan, and adapt. And that could be, a project they're working on. Or I've had some students, they have to work on creating a business. And what is all involved in creating a business? And how can they, plan and adapt to how that is going to be successful. And then once they make that project, having them go back and reflect on what worked, what didn't, and maybe what could be tried next. I think that is super beneficial and exciting. Like they do all of this work working up to this big project, and then it's finished and they present it and it's great, it's done. But what about going back and reflecting on what worked, what didn't, what could be done differently? I think that would be super exciting for you guys to see in your students and how they learn just from that step as well. So number 2 is build predictable routines. So this is already kind of what I talked about. Having those consistent routines helps reduce that anxiety and stress for your students. And it frees up that mental space for them to regulate and make decisions. Now, you could do this a few different ways. Like you can have a visual on your wall of the daily schedule. Sometimes some teachers don't always have that. Other times we have created individual schedules for our students, and so that's on their desk, and they can just look there and know, okay, this is what's next. I really think just having that visual in your classroom is super helpful just for everybody to see what's coming next, what they need to do to get ready for what's next. It really helps support their working memory and task initiation. So number 3 is being able to teach metacognition. So this is, again, getting them to think about, well, what's your plan? What's going to get in the way? How will you know if it's working? All of these asking questions. Like, think about their thinking, having them dig a little bit deeper. And I know this really depends on the age of your students. Kinder isn't really going to think about, how will I know if it's working? What might get in the way? I don't think their level of thinking is quite there yet. But the little bit older students, and like I said, I work at an elementary school, so, I think second grade on up, they can think about these things. Even some first graders, I think, can think about these things. It's really getting that brain working, right? Getting that executive functioning and planning and organizing of thoughts working. So number 4 would be using those emotionally attuned scaffolding, getting these steps in place for your students, those calming visuals, the emotionally safe language, teaching them those co-regulation strategies. Everybody in the class taking those deep breaths, doing their stretching, writing in a journal, all of these little things. It doesn't have to be necessarily student specific, but it could be your whole class. Your whole class obviously is going to benefit from these as well. Number 5, strengthen that working memory. So a lot of those fun games like Simon Says, which may be a throwback for some, memory card games, apps that challenge that recall and do sequencing, verbal rehearsal. So I know a lot of teachers will give instruction and then ask the students to repeat what they just said, having them say it out loud, sometimes giving visual supports. And I see a lot of teachers doing that. They'll write on the board, this is the assignment, this is what you need to do. And then where it goes once you're done, getting all of these memory games going helps to strengthen that working memory. So number 6 is fostering cognitive flexibility. So teaching them a lot of what if scenarios. And I know a lot of students, they come up with their own what ifs, right? Especially like during our fire drill. Well, what if there really was a fire? Well, what if the fire department didn't come? Well, what if we couldn't get outside? Well, what if, they have all the what if questions. So you really don't have to think too hard on that one. And use open-ended questions, right? Encourage multiple solutions. So this is what we do with some of our students when we process with them, when they've had some difficulty and challenging behaviors. We kind of process, well, what do you think, would have helped you? Or what do you think you could have done differently? Or is there some place, you could have went? Or I don't know. But getting them to start thinking and problem solving for themselves is really important for their cognitive flexibility, because I think our tendency is to give them the answers some of the time. I find that with myself sometimes, wanting to tell them, especially they're struggling with their behavior. And of course, I'm like, well, maybe you not hit that person next time. Here's a good idea. Maybe you not elope from the classroom this time. It's very easy for some of us to give them the solution because it's easier, right? It's easier that way. But we want them working and thinking for themselves and what is going to work for them. And that's where using those open-ended questions and encouraging them to do the problem solving is building that cognitive thinking. So number 7 is model and practice impulse control. Use like a stop and think prompt, mindfulness exercises, visual cues, and celebrate those moments of self-control to reinforce the skill. So stop and think prompts. You can actually create your own visual. I'm sure you could buy stuff on Teachers Pay Teachers or Pinterest or something, but I think it's pretty simple, to make on Canva. I love Canva. And just have that posted. Stop and think. We would have that by our door because we had kids who would elope and bolt all the time out of our classroom. And so we started putting stop signs by the door and making them most of the time stopping and thinking before they ran out that room. But I think that's a great visual to have. And you could have, obviously, posted anywhere, whatever works in your classroom, a stop and think. And again, when you have that visual reminder, you don't always have to verbally say it. Sometimes you can just point to it. If you see a student starting to do whatever, remind them to stop and think. And, you could do, maybe just point to your brain and be like, let's stop and think. Get some visual hand motions to that. A lot of students, when they get frustrated, you can tell like they're ready to push somebody out of the way because they're trying to get in line, or they want to steal somebody's pencil because they can't find theirs. Just different impulse activities. I know we've had some students who struggle with stealing from the teacher's desk, stealing from others, stealing food. What are some mindful exercises they can do? Or visual cues. Sometimes you can even just put it on somebody's desk if that works. Or like I said, next to the door if that's a good reminder place. Somewhere in your room, I think having a visual cue is super important if that is what your students are struggling with. And then, of course, you want to celebrate those moments where they have those wins. When you see that they are controlling themselves, it's really cute to see, especially the littles, because they're just sometimes they're really just grinning and bearing it. But it's a celebration to be like, dude, you did so good. You kept your hands to yourself. You didn't push Johnny out of the way when I know you really wanted to, but you held it in and you made the right choice. Just giving that confirmation reinforces that skill. And that is super important just as well. Celebrate. Celebrate as much as you can. Kids love it. We all love it, right? We all love to feel supported and celebrated. So when we get those little wins, when we see those little wins in your students, celebrate them. Sometimes it's just as much as a high five. And just an acknowledgement and a high five goes a long way. Sometimes it's a sticker. Sometimes it's, we have pride punches for cards where we poke holes in the card in a little card. And once those holes are all punched out, then those students get prizes. However you want to do it in your classroom. Like I said, it doesn't have to be this huge deal. A simple high five and acknowledgement goes a long way as well. So just to recap, some core strategies to boost your students' executive functioning is number 1, practice some real life problem solving. Like some friend drama. What can they do about that? Number 2, build those predictable routines. It eases their stress and anxiety, helping for regulation. Number 3, teach that metacognition, helping them to really think a little bit deeper and asking questions. Number 4, use those emotionally attuned scaffolding. Get some steps in place that will help them know what they can do for calming, to get themselves regulated, and if need be, to do some co-regulation with them. Number 5, strengthening that working memory. Using games like memory card games, apps that challenge recall, verbally repeating your instructions. That encourages that working memory. Number 6, foster cognitive flexibility. Give them the options, help them to start thinking outside the box of if the schedule does not go as planned or if that project does not go as planned. And then number 7 is model and practice impulse control. So you as well continue to be that role model, and you could verbally say, you know what, I really wanted to grab this extra donut this morning. It's in the teacher's lounge. I'm hungry, but I know ultimately it's not going to be good for me, right? It's just going to be sugar. It is a type of impulse control, and you succeeded. And so why not share that? Give them little insights, because we as humans, as adults, we struggle with some impulse control as well. And so when they can see like, oh, so they struggle with that too, they can think, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just human like everybody else. I don't have to give in to every single impulse that is in front of me. So, some great info here, I believe, realizing how much executive functioning skills affect your students' emotional regulation and what you can do to help build these executive functioning skills. I really hope this was helpful for you, and I would appreciate it if you leave a review in Apple Podcast. Let me know how this has helped you, and have you tried any of these strategies to help your students grow their executive functioning skills. I truly appreciate you guys. You are doing amazing, and we are on episode 206. Can you believe it? I truly appreciate all of your support. And I just want to continue to encourage you that you are doing amazing work. I know the year has just begun, and stay excited. Stay smiling. Your students want to see that. So thanks again for listening, and I will see you guys next week. Thanks so much for listening. I truly appreciate your support. And if I have encouraged you, motivated you to continue to learn, to support your students, even better, to help them strive in your classroom, please leave a review, hit that subscribe button so that others can see they can learn and grow here as well. Thank you.